The reason this landmark exists is simply because of these guys. They are known as the Hunter ROTC Guerillas. And yes, they have served the Philippines. We're going to talk about them with great detail. The Japanese attacked the Philippines way back in December 8th of 1941, just a few hours after the Pearl Harbor incident. Now, during this time, the national government was recruiting a lot of people in order to fight the Japanese somewhere in Corregidor. Now, there's lots of volunteers. And during that time, a lot were also rejected. The ones that are rejected were deemed to be too young. They were simply teenagers. They were just ROTC cadets. They're not even soldiers yet. The rejected ROTC cadets came from different universities. Some came from University of the Philippines, some came from Ateneo de Manila, La Salle College, Far Eastern University, Jose Rizal College, and Mapua Institute of Technology. They banded together like as if they're having a little picnic. No one actually suspected them because they were kids. They were teenagers. This is how they were formed. They had a little picnic, and that's the first batch of the Hunters ROTC Guerillas. They were composed of 77 individuals. It's not much, but at least it still is a resistance. Their goal was simple. They just need to create as much ruckus in other areas, that way the Japanese soldiers will try to hunt them down, relieving the pressure of Corregidor. Eventually, Corregidor fell. And after that, it actually led to the Bataan Death March. So there were lots of prisoners of war. However, the Hunters ROTC remained together and they are still free. And they decided to remain as a guerrilla group. The 77 individuals was led by none other than Colonel Gustavo Ingles, Colonel Mike Ver, Colonel Eleuterio Adevoso, also known as Terry, and lastly, Colonel Frisco San Juan. I do apologize, but I cannot name all 77 of them. There is a tradition in the military. The oldest has to be the leader, and hence, it was led by Colonel Mike Ver. The first issue that they have to solve is where to find ammo. Not to mention, they need food and water and shelter as well. They are still human beings. Food, water, and shelter was kinda easy because these are locals that are well adept to the landscape. Keep in mind, some of them are actually sons of farmers. So they know the wilderness. They know what to eat and what not to eat. Ammunition, on the other hand, was kinda tricky. There's no factories that actually produce bullets and rifles. So they have to be a little creative. Colonel Gustavo Ingles actually have to lead a raid. The raid will actually target the supply depots of the Japanese. Unfortunately, these supply depots are protected by Filipino families. So they have to negotiate with the Filipino families. And in return, they have to make it appear as if they actually took the armaments by force. This way, the Japanese will not take into consideration that they are in cahoots with the guerrillas. Another way of gaining ammo is to actually trick the Japanese by falsifying documents. So by simply forgeries, they were able to actually convince Japanese soldiers to give them their ammo, claiming it's meant to be delivered in other areas of Luzon. This was a good strategy until it's not. The Japanese found out about this and decided to raid their command center. And unfortunately, there were lots of casualties. Their defeat was kinda imminent. They are after all only 77 boys. And they have to fight an army of Japanese imperial soldiers. The good thing is Colonel Mike Vare was there to protect them. So, being the eldest, he actually grabbed the machine gun, stayed in position, and let them escape. Unfortunately, Mike Vare died on that spot. The aftermath of that battle was kinda devastating. From 77 boys, a few were left, and some actually decided to simply go home. So from 77, try to imagine, it dwindled to 19. The morale was low. But the few that remained actually decided to have a revenge attack. And this became known as the Battle of Pugadlawin. From the 19 boys, they decided to ambush a convoy of 200 Imperial Japanese men. They decided to man the two hills covering the road. And there's a machine gun in the front and a machine gun at the back, creating a very good ambush. The others were holding rifles to eliminate any other stragglers. And believe it or not, it was successful. Too successful that it was completely unbelievable. They were able to terminate 200 Imperial Japanese soldiers. There were no survivors. And they were able to get the goods that came from that convoy. This is how they earned their name. They were hunters, they were ROTC cadets, and they were guerrillas. The news of their achievement became famous, and this improved the support for the Hunter ROTC Guerillas. Every village knows about them and decided to join in. This boosted the morale of everyone in the country. The Japanese actually had a little difficulty trying to solve this particular issue because they don't know where to attack. In order to resolve it, they have to resort to this thing called zoning. Zoning is a means of confining a certain village. Using some local spies known as makapilis, they decided to simply use them in order to point out who are actually guerrillas and who are not. They were also known as the good collaborator by the Japanese. We Filipinos actually call them as mangtuturos. Once they pointed you out, it's actually nearly a death sentence. You are to be taken and sometimes never seen again. One of their main tasks, I'm referring to the hunters, is actually to hunt down those makapilis. Sometimes this is one of the most painful things that has to be done because the makapilis are not Japanese people. They are Filipino people. And they betrayed the nation. Because of the Makapilis, two of the leaders were actually captured. That was Colonel Gustavo Ingles and Colonel Vic Novales. They were tortured and waterboarded. The most painful torture was slipping a bamboo splinter underneath a nail in order to remove the nail. One way to survive is to pretend to be hurt real bad. It turns out that the very same Makapili that actually pointed them out was actually someone aspiring to get into the Hunters ROTC but was rejected. Now keep in mind, there were more than one guerrilla groups during that time. One guerrilla group goes by the name of Marcos Markings Group. They were also attacking the Japanese every now and then, but they are also using the same resources as that of the Hunters ROTC, the same towns, same villages, and sometimes same ammunition. As a testament to their rivalry, the Marcos Markings Group sabotaged a Christmas truce between the Hunters ROTC and a certain Captain Sakai. Captain Sakai is actually a member of the Kempetai. This is the military police group of the Japanese Imperial Army. The Christmas truce actually allowed the Hunters ROTC to meet up with the captain. People that saw the hunters back then realized that they were boys. In fact, they were considered as Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts. When Sakai was trying to negotiate some peace, they had a little agreement. In return, the Hunters ROTC will give something to the Japanese, and the Japanese will give something to the hunters in return as a sign of truce. Now, unfortunately, like I said earlier, the Marcos Markings Group sabotaged it. They caught wind of it and held Captain Sakai hostage. And in return, they were able to gather the goods that was meant for the hunters. And in the end, they executed Captain Sakai. As a result, the town was actually zoned. The Marcos Markings Group actually almost declared war on the Hunters ROTC. However, the Imperial Japanese soldiers was actually more of a threat compared to each other. The hunters also engaged in sabotage. They noticed a certain lumber mill. The sawmill in Fami Laguna was actually being used by the Japanese Imperial Army. It was actually using the Philippine resources just to simply build camps. So they decided to raid that particular sawmill and render it useless. Sabotage is not the only thing that they were known for. Their most daring achievement was actually to do a jailbreak. The POW were actually sent to what we call the New Bilibid prison. This was led by Colonel Honorio Naning K. Guerrero. Using a captured Japanese uniform, he was able to impersonate a Japanese officer. He He banged on the door, and when the guards tried to open up, they were greeted by a group of Hunters ROTC Guerillas. They ordered the Japanese guards to turn off the lights and open all the corridors and, of course, the locks. The prison break became a success. Many people were able to escape. Of course, they cannot release everyone, but they were able to release key prisoners of war that is crucial to the Hunters ROTC, their troops, in other words. Because of the jailbreak, Colonel Gustavo Ingles and Colonel Vic Novales are now free. They will play a role later on. It came to pass that the Hunters were starting to get a little recognition. And one person in particular realized how good they were. That was General MacArthur. MacArthur sent one of his troops. He goes by the name of Major J. Vanderbilt. He arrived via submarine. This way, he will not be detected by the Japanese Imperial Army. And when he arrived, he didn't just arrive by himself. He provided rifles, machine guns, and ammunition to the Filipino guerrillas. There were multiple guerrillas factions back in the day, but he chose the guerrillas that was the most organized, and he chose the Hunters. And it was certainly a good choice. The Hunters are now properly equipped. They not just have rifles, they have machine guns. They also have a lot of ammo and proper uniforms. During that time, if you're not wearing a uniform, you're just considered as a bandit, not exactly a soldier. And this actually changed everything. Now that they have new armaments, the Hunters participated in the liberation of Manila, and they timed it properly. The Americans bombed the Japanese positions in Manila, and they in turn shot the stragglers. It's also important to note that Colonel Gustavo Ingles and Colonel Vic Novales participated in this particular battle. They must have felt some sort of relief being able to fight back after being prisoners of war. This forced the Japanese to retreat and form what we call the Shimbo Line. The Shimbo Line is a defensive line to actually safeguard the retreat of the Japanese and to secure the headquarters of General Yamashita. After the liberation of Manila, the Hunters liberated one town after the other, and they started to focus towards the south. The south contains what we call the Laguna Lake, and this is where they hunted one of the stragglers of the Japanese army. The Japanese army was actually trying to cross the lake, and they actually have to turn off their lights via the boat. When the Japanese army was close enough, they opened fire and the boat sank. The reason they were focusing south is for one simple reason. There's a concentration camp filled with prisoners of war, internees to be exact. The Japanese are actually planning to execute all the prisoners of war. The raid was conducted by Colonel Honorio Naning Guerrero. He's the same guy that actually did the jailbreak in a New Bilibid prison. Now keep in mind, the Hunter ROTC need more men in order to do this, so they have to coordinate with other guerrilla groups in order to free the internees of that concentration camp. And this became a success. The internees were saved. Due to the constant bombing of the Americans on the Shimbo line and multiple hunting groups hunting down the Japanese stragglers, the Shimbo line actually fell. Yamashita surrendered eventually, and just like that, the war ended. The Hunters did their part in World War II, and of course after the war they have to prepare for peace. They have to go back to civilian life. Some of them just got married, some of them became politicians, one even became a banker, and one became a movie star. Regardless of what they became, they all have stories that they will treasure for the rest of their lives. It is important to note that the Hunters didn't share all the adventures that they had. In fact, I myself cannot even name all the Hunters, even the original ones. There is a chance that some of the stories that I'm telling might be a little inaccurate, but I'll tell it as accurately as I can do it justice. Some stories simply appeared after the war ended. One member actually had multiple shrapnel wounds that was discovered by the doctor. Another was suffering from a throat infection, only to realize that it was the bayonet wound that was given to him during the war. That was something he didn't even share to his family. In fact, one way to even determine what happened is to also look at the murals. Some of the stories are even passed down via the word of mouth, not even written down. If you check the mural right behind the landmark I showed you earlier, it's going to show you some details, and one particular sculpture actually caught my attention. It's actually the mural of a pilot, a US pilot that crash landed and they have to rescue him. I can't find this in any history book. However, this mural actually mirrors one of the memories of the Hunters ROTC. I'm suspecting that this event happened during the liberation of Manila. Regardless of what happened, one thing is for certain: they did their part in defending the country, they stood up to the challenge, and they did a good job regarding that. This video is dedicated to them, and I hope they will never be forgotten.